Right, I'm going to do a quick introduction to Wendy before I hand over to Daryl. I've known Wendy now for quite a few years, Wendy,
Yep.
and cross paths and a couple of companies as well. And when Daryl, Heidi, Martin, and I were talking about, who shall we invite, we wanted somebody inspirational to come and have a chat with us. And I remember all of our conversations and your generosity with sharing, your own personal experiences with me. And, I've always felt that that's always really brave for anybody to be able to share experiences so that we can all learn from each other. And hence, I picked you without too much thought. Let me see if I can get a hold of Wendy to come and talk to us. So I'm so grateful for you for making the time to spend with us this afternoon. And on that note, I'm going to pass over to Daryl, who's going to help guide you, Wendy, through a conversation with us. And we will have a Q&A session after the chat as well for people if they've
Perfect.
got questions. That's wonderful. Over to you, Daryl, and I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thanks, Christine. I appreciate it. And yeah, just a reminder to everybody, if you can just pop your questions, if you have them during the chat, into the chat session, and Heidi, Martin, and Christina are moderating those for us. So we'll get to those questions at the end. And there's also, as Christine mentioned, a bit of time for us to all sort of join in the chat and have a good a conversation towards the end of the session. So. Firstly, thank you, Wendy, for joining us today. Really appreciate you taking some time out of what I imagine is a very busy calendar to talk to us and to provide some of your insight into your career and where things are heading and similar things. So I think because we haven't actually had a chance to sit down and talk before the event, I'm probably in the same situation as most of the people on the call here by not knowing a great deal about you. So I'm hoping that you could tell us the Wendie Lee story.
Sure.
Sort of starting where maybe what you studied when you were younger and how you got into a career and what that has led on to now.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. I'll start by saying that I'm a learner from experience. So I love meeting new people and talking. It's how I learn, predominantly my learning style. So any opportunity to meet with any smart people is always welcome. We actually, just before I introduce sort of my career, we at one of our most recent brand conferences, we had this fantastic keynote speaker, and she challenged us around how we introduce ourselves. She gave us this 2-minute activity of you just stand up and find somebody in the room and introduce yourself without saying where you work, where you grew up, anything about your family, and where you're from. But it was really hard to kind of, oh, how do you introduce yourself without saying what you do and anything about your family? It was really challenging. And so we, as a result, it encouraged us to think about who we are when we introduce ourselves, not just what we do. So as I've refined that, I'll start with that and then I'll talk about what I've done. So I am an energetic person. You haven't realized already. So I'm quite an energetic person, and I'm really motivated by change, whether that be personal growth or professional growth, and seeing other people grow, seeing organizations change. That's actually like what motivates me. So I have moved around in my career because I've seen maybe the opportunity for growth for me or for the organization has reached its natural point, and I'm ready to go somewhere else because I know somebody else needs me. So that's kind of who I am. So I'm known for being quite transformative in any role I'm in, and I'm never afraid to challenge the norm. I'm a bit of a rebel, so I'm always often the one that asks the question in the room that other people might be thinking, and that's just who I've always been. So with that being my journey, I didn't actually study. So I left high school at 16. Yep. So I left high school at 16, left home at 16, and grew up pretty fast. I had no idea what I wanted to do when I was older, and I didn't enjoy school. So I started work full time. And I think that path's led me to who I am today. And I recently was on a panel to some year 9 girls at QT, and I was dreading that question. But actually, I think one of the advantages of being in IT is that there's so many entry points into IT. It doesn't have to be always through study. So the core of my beginning of my career was in service roles. So retail, administration, reception, things like that. And my start in IT was actually an IT help desk. So I think what that gave me straight away is empathy for the user of the tools, and that's helped me throughout my whole career. So I worked in service. I was a Microsoft systems engineer back in the day. And I reached a natural point in my career where I chose leadership versus technology, which often could happen through your career where you've grown and you're going like, I love the tech, but actually I'm enjoying the leadership more. So I moved into project management, program management, general management, and up from there. And so some of the things I've done in my career in the early days, I rolled email into branches in the early 2000s, for instance, as a program manager, which was a story I often use that relates to AI now, because it was back in the day when everyone was moving to email and everyone's like, no, this is going to change our world. We can't possibly move to email. But actually it was happening whether they were ready for it or not, and they had to move. So I did that. I worked for Datacom for a long time in New Zealand as well. So I've worked for IT services providers. I ran the Ministry of Justice business for Datacom, which means my team looked after the case management system for New Zealand, ran the courts. We were looking at courts of the future and all sorts of interesting things all the way back then. So I learned about how to journey map a court journey for the criminals in the court. It was fascinating. When I moved to Australia, I moved in with Datacom, and I took on my first sort of transformational role, which was my first digital transformational role. And then I moved to Queensland for Super Retail Group. So sort of as I went further up the tree into more transformative general management roles, Super Retail Group, before they acquired Rebel Sport. So, taking a company and adding a whole third as big as what you already had was a whole new experience. So that was so I ran IT operations, I ran delivery, and I ran transformation. My first CIO role, which is where Christine and I first met through the incredible Stefano, was the world's biggest dairy company, but the Australian part of that, which was fascinating. Went to Flight Centre 8 weeks before the whole world stopped traveling, which was epic for Heidi and I. But transformed refunds while we were there again with Heidi. So we've learned. It was crazy, wasn't it, Heidi? But it was amazing. Yep. And then Morgan's Financial, the CIO and financial services, and now I'm back at Flight Centre. So that's a bit about my history.
Well, the first word that comes to mind is wow. that's an impressive career, and it's still going and still building. It's amazing. I have to say that I feel confident that you said you didn't study, because neither did I. So I often have conversations with people about what degrees they have and their experiences in university and their gap years and things like that. And it's like, okay.
Yeah.
So we find you now at Flight Centre, responsible for technology in the B2B space, as I understand. And so tell me a little bit about what that is, and also the team that works for you, and what their responsibilities are.
Yeah, it stinks. It's interesting. Like prior to this, I've been a CIO, and I love the remit of that role, because it's everything, as you know, from cybersecurity to IT operations to delivery to strategy to app development, everything. I came back for this role because it's really commercially aligned. So my title is Chief Product Officer. So it's no longer CIO, which is great because I don't have to run IT operations anymore. I've done that, as I said, I was a systems engineer, so it's been decades since I've been doing that. So my role as Chief Product Officer for both the luxury division and the B2B division, these are the two fastest growing divisions in Flight Centre Travel Group. There's a lot of brands in Flight Centre. We are not the red one, right? We're the other ones that are going to live long into the future, because travel's changing and people aren't going into stores. So what we're doing is the opposite. So my role, I sit and report to the managing director of those divisions, and I also have a dotted line, it's the other way, but I also report to the CXO, who leads all the leisure technology group. So my remit is drive commercial returns and growth through technology. So that's the remit. So how can we use technology to grow these businesses? One of the businesses' goal is to go from 2 billion to 6 billion in 4 years. So it's like strap yourself in. We're growing fast. We're in 5 regions around the world. We're selling stuff we haven't built yet. All of that is happening. And we're staying one step ahead of what the customer needs. And so in my team, I have a product team. So product managers. It's not a big team. This is the smallest team I've led for quite a long time, but it feels really impactful. So I have designers, so UX design, 4 product managers, a BA, and customer success. And then we have a head of engineering with 2 types of engineering practices. So it's actually quite a small team, but it's a really interesting area to work in. It's different than just sort of traditional tech.
Yeah, that's interesting. So when you say sort of figuring out what the customer needs before they know they need it, so how do you sort of understand what those needs are, and how do you sort of create the reality out of that vision?
Yeah, it's something that I think talk to the customer would be my first answer. Spend time with the customer. And what I enjoy about the role I'm in now is I'm actually with my peers pitching for customers, especially in B2B. So in our B2B world, we have independent travel agents or big travel businesses that run their own travel business. And they use our technology, some or all of their technology to run their business, and they buy travel product through us. So it's B2B. So we've got to win their business. So I spend time selling to them and engaging with them around what they need. And in the B2C space, so luxury, again, you spend time with your advisors. So I would say spend time with customers, spend time in the industry. Like, you really need to get to know your industry, spend time with suppliers, get to know people, build connections, do your own research. There's a lot of information available. And then we also have, as I said, a research and design practice. So we actually, and that's something that Flight Centre does quite well, more than I've probably seen before, is actually we have experienced researchers who will actually go and do structured and unstructured research across all of our customer segments, as well as full client journey mapping, but actually really detailed research pieces. And they're looking not only at what customers need now, but what's shifting in the industry that we need to be ready for, and what's maybe happening in some parallel or different industries that we can leverage in ours. And sometimes that's also speaking to suppliers, whether it be Salesforce or Microsoft or others around what's happening in industries like insurance or banking or things that are not necessarily travel that we can then use, because at the end of the day, they might all be the same consumer. So a few different techniques. I think it's something you can just never do enough of, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree. So it sort of does raise the question there around stakeholders. So it feels like you've got internal stakeholders, you've got a raft of external stakeholders, from independent operators to vendors to supply partners. How do you formalize the sort of stakeholder engagement and communication, or is it somewhat sort of ad hoc and up to the experience of the team members?
I think it depends is the answer, Daryl. Sometimes we do, especially if we're embarking on a research activity for an intended, like, say, for instance, we've got a new product that we want to bring into our ecosystem, and we're embarking on proof of concept, and we've got this idea. Then we would formalize to say who are all the people that we need internally as advocates, because we're in 5 countries. So which region are we going to work with? Who are the roles we need in that country? Who are our target customer segments? So sometimes you formalize it and for specific reasons, and other times it's business as usual to continuously manage your stakeholders. So yeah, it's a bit of both depending on the intent. But I think in roles like mine, or in certain roles, you have to always have a web accessible at all times, and then you have to have a targeted group for specific things. That's how I see it.
Yeah, so obviously over time you've had plenty of opportunities to learn from that experience. What would you think would be the key things you've learned from trying to manage this array of interests and potentially conflicting interests, and expectations?
I was reflecting on this just last week. I think you just have to build an informal network for sounding boards to sense check if you're on the right track. And it's harder to do if you're further away from the customer. So the closer you can be to build your own relationships as a human being in whatever domain you're in, you can then pick up the phone and go, hey, did that communication make sense? Or so I think that's one of the biggest things that's helped me throughout my journey, building that network. And it takes time and it takes a bit of courage, especially if you're new, to actually reach out for a coffee. But I've never met anyone who won't say yes to a coffee or won't pick up the phone. You just keep trying and you find people. So I have built an informal network would be one lesson. And then just yeah, don't underestimate the importance of it, because you can't assume just one stakeholder group is your key group. You do need to think about who are your real decision makers. It's not always the top. There's influences alongside. So it does require a bit of listening, learning, speaking to discover that. And I know that I'm talking because that's my style. So I'm not a very structured person around things like that, but I surround myself with people who are, and they can help me do that better. But it's a constant job to manage stakeholder expectation. There is always more demand than capacity in technology. So you are always having to negotiate with people around what they need. And you just learn different methods to do that, I think, over time.
Yeah, and I like your point about having complementary skills in the team as well.
Yeah.
You've got a sort of diverse range of sort of personality types in your team, I take
You have to, I think. Yes, of course. I would drive them crazy if they're all like me.
I feel like I'm remembering some of these stories that Heidi was telling me about at Flight Centre as well, particularly just sort of dealing with lots of people in.
Yeah, Flight Centre is a big organisation, isn't it, Heidi? And it's very big, but not that hierarchical, which is interesting. So you would imagine it's a listed company, so you can see the scale of the company. You would think that there's multiple layers. There actually aren't. It's actually, and there's a lot of people who've worked there a really long time. Who have their big network, but I haven't been there that long in comparison. I've been there 2 years in total, really, 2 and a bit years. But what I'm quite good at is just being super open and asking lots of questions and you just have to be a learner and you have to listen and you have to just figure out quite quickly how the network works to get things done. And then as soon as you start delivering things, that momentum just builds. But you have to kind of figure it out as an organization to be able to achieve things.
Yeah. I have noticed that if you ask lots of questions, people tend to like to enjoy that. They're actually, they feel like they're being heard because you're asking your opinions on things, which
absolutely.
Yeah. It is just sort of normal sort of human relationship forming, isn't it? So
but there are specific techniques you can use if it's not your natural strength. There's all sorts of methodologies you can follow. There is stakeholder mapping. You could find the communications person in the organization and ask them to explain their stakeholder analysis. There are, as I said, some people in the team who are really good at that you could shadow. So there's different ways you could do it if it's not your natural style.
I do find that change management functions in organizations usually have people that are good with communication, so they can be a common source of. Yeah. So you're responsible for technology in an industry that is heavily reliant on technology, and everything's changing at a faster and faster rate. So what's your thoughts on how you can keep up to date with everything that's going on and how you can use that to develop those relationships with your business stakeholders?
Yeah, I just think it's our job in technology to keep up to date. How do I do that? I think we will do it slightly differently. So I'm not a big book reader, for instance, but I do subscribe to lots of different LinkedIn. I probably use LinkedIn as a source of quick learning bites, whether it's blogs or little snippets of videos and things like that. That's kind of one way I learn. Then I learn from events. I do quite a bit of speaking, so that forces you to kind of do the research to stay ahead. Like when you're seen as when you are a voice of knowledge, you have to be ahead. So I do my research, I do my reading, I learn and speak to other people to help me be prepared. Whilst it's changing fast, at the same time, some things are staying the same. And what I mean by that, it's getting faster. Like you all know that the AI is accelerating the opportunities, but the things that are still slowing us down are the way decisions are made in organizations or our data readiness and all of those things. Those things haven't changed, hey, the letter. Like, to be honest, the business case process still inhibits you from innovating, for instance, or we're too busy to innovate. These things are actually still there in our industry. So I think working with really smart partners to help you innovate and continuously finding different ways to innovate and continuously learning is the role that we have to take, but then also chipping away at the barriers to all of that also. So I do spend a lot of time with suppliers, with peers, with people, with reading to continuously stay ahead.
So you talked about partners and sort of external parties, the organisation around innovation. I think that's really important. Obviously, there's a lot of money being invested by vendors in developing their offerings, so it's great to be able to leverage their budgets for the purpose of advancing technology. But what about internal innovation within the group? How does that sort of work, and how do you sort of tap into that capability?
Yeah, like everywhere I've worked has a different approach to innovation, but nowhere I've seen does it perfectly, I would say. I think unless you're Amazon or Google, who have these beautiful, amazing methodologies, like the walking backwards methodology for AWS, for instance, where they walk back. Like, I think what I would say is exposing your organization to other organizations and how they do it is a way to shift your organization towards doing it differently. So for me, like we've done innovation with Amazon on a particular AI thing we're working on now, but actually just taking the teams through the process that they went through, them driving the process for us shows us how we could do it better. So that's one thing. I don't see innovation as a thing on the side. You've got to create a culture where innovation's happening continuously. So in my team, we don't necessarily call out innovation projects per se. I work hard to create a culture where people are innovating every time they try and solve a problem. So, for instance, our ecosystem we imagine we're growing really fast. So, we've got automated onboarding for all of our clients, for instance, into our ecosystem, and it's all driven by Salesforce under the hood. So our Salesforce team is continuously working on how can they innovate through AI in that ecosystem by solving the problem. So I'd rather it be part of a culture where you can just continuously do it, is I think the fastest path to innovate, where the team feel they can trial, learn safely in their work. That's my preference for how we approach it. But from time to time, you do need like a specific targeted proof of concept or innovation. But I haven't really, in my whole career, seen many of those then result in something. They happen, and then someone repeats it over here, just a personal observation. But at the moment, we do have some targeted proof of concepts because they're big, meaty industry things that we want to lead. And in that case, we've got some internal people working on a problem statement, we've got some external. But again, the best way to bring it to life is to attach it to a problem statement or a strategy. If you're just doing these things for the sake of it, it will never have a chance, I think, of turning into something. So if you can attach it to the strategy is this, the problem statement is this, the opportunity, and then we're going to innovate to get to that. I think that's the way to create innovation. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, strategic alignment's never a bad thing, is it? And it also kind of helps with your funding requests, your business cases and such.
Yeah, 100%.
I have noticed historically that innovation functions, when they're stood up in organisations, tend to be focused on the product and services that the organisation delivers. But internal innovation is just as valuable to the organisations. It's interesting to hear the things you were talking about, like onboarding processes, Salesforce, that sort of thing. But what I think I'm hearing you say is that you're creating an atmosphere where people feel they're safe in being able to come up with ideas, challenge the status quo, and make suggestions.
Yep, absolutely. And so we've got this incredible B2B ecosystem, and one of our goals is to have every customer we have in there every single day. It's like a front end to all the technology that they can use, and at the moment that objective's not where we want it to be. So we've got a goal, and the team created an innovation around promoting travel product through this, and I was barely involved, and haven't got a big team, but the team innovated. They worked with South Africa and Canada. They brought it to life. They intentionally time boxed it, and it's exceeded the results. So I love that that. Like, I love that the team just went and tried it. As long, you know, obviously there's some parameters around don't put anything that's not secure or is going to bring down the environment and all those things, but they're smart enough to know that. So I think it's, creating that opportunity to innovate on a problem while you're working towards a strategy as opposed to innovating alongside your core work is the fastest path to find the solutions, I think.
Yeah, it's always good when you've got one of those teams working for you, isn't it? You can trust them to go and do those things and know what the parameters in which they have to operate. Yeah, that's fantastic. So we very, very briefly sort of skirted past the concept of AI in the conversation earlier. I have to ask, how is it impacting your industry, and what are you looking to the future in terms of the leveraging of that sort of growing capability?
Yeah, look, I think it's impacting every industry, and travel's one of the industries that's been predicted to be impacted the most, which is very interesting. I think the research shows that and you've got to ChatGPT and search a travel itinerary, right? So there's a lot of talk about will AI replace the travel agent? So there's certainly a fear in the industry that AI will replace the travel agent because it's doing the travel agent's job. There is a risk that that could happen if we don't approach it appropriately as an industry, but we don't believe that that's true fundamentally if we know our value. So I think that our personal view on this, and my personal view on that, is that the biggest opportunities for AI in the industry is productivity, for sure. Like our and Heidi knows as well, the travel sector is very, if you can imagine, like one travel agent can't possibly know about the 4,000 hotels available around the world that they can book. And it's quite difficult to build a system that aggregates all of the possible travel product around the world to one place to find. So it is a industry where the travel agent has to jump in and out of multiple tools at all times. So I feel like there's a really big productivity goal for travel and for business owners to run their business smarter. What that then does is it emphasizes the value of the travel agent to actually provide that human service, because people come to us because they can't figure out how to do it themselves. So the research validates, and actually it's younger people. It's not just a certain demographic who might be our current customer. The research validates that people are still seeking a human connection. And when their travel needs become complex or they have more money to spend, hence the luxury traveler, they will actually seek personal advice, like a financial advisor, so to speak. You get to a point where sure you can trade online yourself, but as soon as your wealth goes up or your complexity goes up, you kind of want to speak to a person. So we saw travel peak post-COVID because of all the risks around COVID and stuff. And so for us, we have to stay on this. Like, how do we make our advisors more productive through AI by making them helping them work smarter, taking away some of the pain that they have to deal with? How do we use AI to, help service the client more cost effectively? For instance, like when they're traveling and they need help, can we use AI smarter in their travel journey? But then importantly for me, it's about how can AI be used to really, really personalize that service for the client, but not in a way that removes the need of the travel agent.
Right. So maintaining a human in the loop.
A human, yeah. And a term that I'm using is humanized digital, and it's not my term, and it's a term that I've heard somewhere and I love it, so I'm using it. Because to us it is about, not the tech not replacing the human. It's not the direction of the travel, but it's how can you humanize the technology experience and create really smart digital channels at a lower cost that actually increases the value of a travel agent. Accepting that there will be certain types of customers and certain types of travel that will always be online. And we should do that super smart with AI, but then where we really want to go for the luxury traveler or increase our share of wallet for travel or, really win over that returning customer, then there's lots of different ways we could be using AI. It's really interesting.
Yeah. We don't want to sort of start talking about the potential for AI to replace us completely. Everybody sort of has an opinion on that, but I do recall about a dozen years or so ago, I was working for a travel company that I could see the contempt in the eyes of the users of the systems that they were going to have to use a GUI because it was just slowing them down when they could get on their GDS and type in those codes and everything had just happened. So I could see a lot of benefit, I guess, in that productivity side of things that you're talking about.
Yeah, especially
That
when you think about, like, there's still more demand than agents, you know what I mean? And Flight Centre itself, and this is all public information, is smaller than it was in terms of its cost base and the number of stores and the number of advisors. But for us to grow, we don't just want to open more stores and add more advisors. So there's this, and we want to bring people into the industry as well. But the really good ones have been here 20 years. So there's certainly a subset of new entrants to the industry that need to be able to get there faster, up to speed. And that's certainly where these productivity tools and AI and data can help people learn travel quicker.
Just curious, based on that, are you seeing any sort of generational change in terms of how the industry is handling the operating models, the customer relationships, the use of the technologies?
Do you mean generational changes in our customer segments?
More so in the providers.
Mm. Look, I think there's generational change, but I think COVID showed all of us that consumers act in different ways. So I don't think I know I'm not going to quite answer your question in the right way. From a customer perspective, there is generational change. We're targeting generational change, but as I said, it's actually the younger traveller still seeks a travel agent, but they just wouldn't find them in a traditional way. If that makes sense. So from a consumer perspective, if you ask somebody age 25, would they go into a Flight Centre store in a mall? They won't. So I think there's a demographic that still seek the service, but are seeking it in a different way. And that challenges us to bring our services to the market in a different way. So I think there's a demographic. And then there's, as I said earlier, there will be a change in over time of demographic of our team, because people will retire, and that's normal in any industry. And travel, just like some other industries, do have some blue screen stuff still in them. So we've got to find more modern tools, and there'll always be a change journey for our team on this as well. So it is continuously changing, especially in travel.
Yeah, so the customer need isn't really changing, but the channels are changing, and
channels will change, the expectations for real time, the expectation for more personalized. Like, why are you asking me that question again? I've already told you. Like that. All of those. I think the expectations for pace have increased. And it's industries like banking, I think, who have led the way, or insurance. Like there's other industries around us that have really led the way in the new digital channel, the way you work. Like I'd never go into a bank branch. I don't know about you, but and the way that everything's just so trusted in an app, but then some industries are not there yet. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
But the consumers have already expected that now. But there's not many industries that are caught up. But we also don't have the same amount of money to spend as financial services on those things, right?
Yeah, I guess the consumerization of technology over the last sort of 20, 25 years has sort of driven businesses' responses in some ways, which is interesting to see it play out. So just on the subject of technology then, and as technologists, what's your advice in terms of how people can get into a career in technology and where it can go, and how they can keep pace with all of these changes and what those changes mean for them?
Like I would join groups like those who have joined this group, and I love that there's a woman in architecture. I'm passionate about architecture. I'm happy to give my views on that. And there's not enough women doing much of what we do. So, but joining industry groups like this is a good way to peer network. I found technology as an industry is quite small, even though it's big, especially in, I don't know, even in Sydney. I think Brisbane, I don't know where everyone's based, but most towns, Sydney's massive, so it might be a bit harder, but here in Brisbane, we've certainly got women in technology, women in digital. We've got, there's all sorts of forums. So connect yourself with peers. And if you do study, there are paths through that as well. So I know that, I spent a bit of time with Gemma at QUT, and they have a great partnership with Cisco, for instance. So they have innovation centres. So there are plenty of paths in or ways to connect in with the industry. And then I don't think people understand quite the breadth of roles that are possible in technology. You don't have to start with an engineering path, I would say. And I find that it's okay, it starts somewhere, and then through that you'll probably find your path. And I know that's just said might sound light, but that's how I got where I got. And because this, when you're into an organization, there will be so much more opportunity that might open up. You just kind of got to find your way in and try all sorts of different ways to get in. So for me, it was IT help desk to desktop engineer to systems engineer to project manager, but someone else might start as a engineer and actually have a little bit of leadership. And then before you know it, they're an agile delivery manager or a scrum master. And then they say, oh, leadership's my path, or they just want to become a senior engineer. So it is a career with many layers and many paths, but finding mentors, finding groups, following people on LinkedIn, all of those, which probably apply to most industries, but I think in technology, people want to support people and there's not enough people. So look for the opportunities, I would say. I think they're there.
That's great. And connect to people like Andrew Blades, who knows everybody. I can tell you.
Always know somebody, right? Like it's a small world.
It is just on that. So I spend most of my time in Perth, but I have lived in Sydney. And in Perth, there's an unwritten rule that you don't burn any bridges because it's a small place and everybody knows each other. So I moved to Sydney. There's 3 times as many people in Sydney and everybody knew each other.
Yeah. I'm from Wellington, right? So New Zealand, and it's very like you would just run into people on the street every day that you knew. But when I moved to Sydney in 2008, it was really hard for me to find a role. I landed in the GFC, big city, didn't know anybody. But I ended up back at Datacom, which is the company I was with in Wellington, which is great. So that was great for me. I ended up finding a role, but I still had to try and beat the streets to find the right role there. But if you work hard on if you deliver well and you've got a good attitude and you're performing, doors will open for you over time. But working the networks, being known, is important, I think, as well, because people will think of you. Because my peers and I are always like, do you know somebody who could do this? Like, it does happen like that in some industries.
And there's some great examples of that on this call today as well. So I've just got one more question before we open up to the audience for other questions. So I just wanted to understand your views on success. So what does success look like for you and for your team, and how do you celebrate it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've got a different answer for my personal life to work. I'll start with work. It's something that since I've been at Flight Centre, Chris Steiner, my leader, one of his strengths, which counteracts the way I work, is we're rolling out an OKR framework in our organization. This is something that Chris has really championed really well. That's actually helped me hone in an alignment to strategic goals and a real focus on results. And that's something that isn't my natural style of working. So I've always delivered results, but actually being able to be methodical in tracking them and reporting them on them every week, as part of your leadership is really good. So what that means is we have set very clear objectives as a team, and every week we're discussing the results and whether we're tracking them or not. And every quarter we set new goals, or we set the same objective, but we adjust our results. And we make sure our work always aligns to those things, and we're continuously reviewing that at the end of the quarter and the beginning of the next quarter. And throughout this year, that's now been rolled out through the whole organization. So it happens in my executive teams and the brands that I'm in, as well as in my team. And so that's how we track that we're achieving it. And one of the things we did at the end of financial year was an audit as to what value we delivered. So, and did we deliver value as in, did it deliver like financial value to the bottom line, or was it just an enabler? And one of our goals is so what we do is every win we capture, and continuously we've got a Slack channel called Wins. It's every small thing you win, capture it as you do it. Because at the end of the year, it's really hard. It's like when you have to write your CV and you can't remember what you did. Like capture it as you go, and celebrate it. And then one thing Flight Centre is really good at is rituals around celebrating success. Really good. It's one of the strengths of the company culture. So we certainly have monthly Buds nights with awards. And then we have Global Gathering, which is a huge party that the top performers of the organisation can win tickets to. And then we have our own little team celebrations. So I think it's multiple layers of celebration, but tracking your wins, because it gets tough. There's this time where you can feel like I'm slogging away and I'm not achieving anything, but you're actually achieving a lot. So write them down as you achieve them and leave that somewhere really visible. and then you look back. And then every month we have it all in for every team member across my B2B brand, and we promote all the things we've achieved in the month to everybody. So we're quite vocal about them as well, which is good. Not in a showy way, but just, just so the team understands that we're delivering a lot of value.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Just tracking the wins, just getting into that discipline of recording it when it happens, so that you do have that record. And I suppose you talked about the impact on the bottom line, but also the enablers as well, and they have that effect if time is given to determine what that flow-on effect is to the bottom line. That's Did you mention that personal will be different? Did you want to share any of that with us?
Yeah, so this year, and this year, since going back to this role, I've come back to a role with slightly less responsibility than I had before. So yes, my role is still big, and yes, it's global and across 2 divisions, so it's not small, but I've taken a slight sidestep to be the CPO focus, so I can learn more about the commercial element of actually sitting right alongside the MD and the CFO to grow a business. But I work 4 days a week now, so I've chosen to, I know, right? So I don't work Fridays. So that's my personal goal, is to work the hours that I've got and love my work, but not burn myself out while I'm doing it. I'm a fitness instructor, as Heidi knows, on the side as well. So I teach spin classes. I know so it's a bit crazy, but I do that as well. So my personal goals are to enjoy my work, but not have it burn me out, and find a balance. So at the stage in my career, I'm really enjoying not working Fridays.
That is brilliant. I love that. I've been trying to do that for some time.
So you have to accept there's a compromise for when you do it, but it's quite nice. It does make my 4 days pretty busy, but
yeah, that's fantastic. Okay, I'm going to stop talking now, and I'm going to have a look at the questions. So I think we got quite a few questions coming in. So I'll just see if I can get through some of those.
I can fire off the first one if you want to, Daryl.
Fantastic. Thanks, Heidi.
And this one's from Christine. So as Wendie, as you've moved from CIO and financial services into a CPO role back in travel, how have you noticed the demographic and team composition? So the mix of talent in your teams, how's that changed?
So nice to see you, Heidi. Yeah. Oh, I think it's pretty similar, Christine. I'd say that it is, one thing I'd say is Flight Centres are really, really much more gender balanced than anywhere I've ever worked. It's fantastic. Like, it's, my executive teams, like there's 1 man and like 7 women. The MD's a woman, the CFO's a woman. Like, it's very, very different at Flight Centre than anywhere else I've worked. But when you come into the technology, I think product managers tend to be more, there's a bit of 50-50. So I've got 50-50 in my team. Got my software architect is a woman. She just started 2 weeks ago. Our cybersecurity practice is 70% women. So I think we actually have quite a high demographic, but I think that's the culture I'm in, as opposed to it being the same everywhere. Traditionally, though, your engineering is still more heavily weighted the other way, and as is sort of infrastructure. It's still harder to find a mix in those roles, which is disappointing, isn't it? Because it's not like these industries haven't been around for a while, but I'm proud to say that my team's 50-50, including engineering and architecture, which is great.
I could probably add some insight there from an architecture perspective. So we know that enterprise architecture is about 13 to 14% female, which is one of the reasons why WIA Australia was created.
Yeah.
But business architecture, interestingly, is more like 35 to 40% female. So
that's interesting.
A different career path, I think, into those. Okay, so next question.
Just read ahead on Andrew's question. So when you're assessing through with opportunities, what are the key parameters that you look for a go, no go? And there's a related part to this as well. So Christine had also asked, how do you speed up decision making?
The first question, is that about opportunities around like the example for go-to-market product that I used before? Yeah. So how do you make a no-go? Again, start with making sure you're really clear on what the customer value proposition is. Really, what problem are you solving? And does that problem, when you solve that problem, does it solve the problem for the customer and the company? So if it solves the customer problem, but also returns financials, you kind of go, that sounds like a pretty solid reason to work on something. So that would be the first start. Do the research to make sure you can really align it to the right problem statement. And then you take small steps towards it with gates along the way. So in that example I used around promoting deals, does it align to our company goal of selling more travel product? Yes. Does it align to the customer goal of help me find all the deals? Yes. Okay, so that's got something in it. And then how can you invest just enough in it so you can test whether it actually works? So kind of know up front what objective it aligns to and what your initial results might be that you're chasing. So, you know, if this succeeded, what result would it move? You know, and really spending some time thinking about that so that you're actually able to measure the outcome, because you might do this all work and not have thought about how you're going to measure it, and then you can't even assess whether it's being successful. So if you do those things up front and during, then the decision becomes easier to make because you're clear, there's a strategic alignment, there's customer alignment, the results speak for themselves, and you'll go, actually, we tried that and it didn't shift the dial. Okay, well, maybe it's not the one to go after, but if the results are really obvious, it makes it easier to make the decision. So, yeah.
And I can vouch for us actually doing that in practice. So Wendie was very quick with backing an idea and decision making across customer business objectives through the COVID remediation work that we did. So I've seen it in action. So it can happen really quickly where there's a burning customer need and a business need.
Exactly. It really can. And I think the speeding up decision making, to be honest, Christine, if I had the magic answer, I would give it. I'm a fast decision maker, so I find it challenging at times that I can't make all the decisions myself. There's no perfect way. Hey, every place I've worked has a different decision process, and there's a business case template, but then there's another path that some people get decisions around without that. And I think just learn the decision-making processes of the organization and accept that there's a formal path and an informal path. So if you are presenting something upwards for a decision, you probably have to have spoken to every person in that room before you present it, you know. So there's always an informal influencing path to a decision and a formal. But if the former was really sharp, like I just worked on a decision that took 11 months to get approved, right? And as hard as that was, the organization wasn't ready to make the decision. And sometimes I have to accept that I know it was the right decision, but they weren't ready. So kind of not burn yourself out because it wasn't the right time or the right moment or what have you. But when we presented the decision, it was so clear that we're moving this objective from here to here. This is the results we're going after. This is the research we've done. This is how we're going to innovate. And it was approved in like 5-minute conversation, but it took 11 months to get to that point. Yeah. So I don't think there's a magical way. I try and use all the methods. But to Heidi's point, sometimes you land in the right place at the right time with the right problem and the right opportunity, and it will suddenly just get approved. And then you're like, oh my goodness, now we've got to do it. Right?
And if you think Wendie's a fast decision maker with this, she's also really gun spin instructor. I've personally done her class quite a few times as well, just in case you're wondering.
I can motivate people to climb the mountain.
Yep, 100%. We had another question from Jana around the frontline staff, so people that are interacting with customers in contact centre type roles. How are they responding to the opportunities that AI presents?
That's a really good question. I don't actually know if I'm best placed to answer that because I haven't spoken enough to them, would be my initial response. So any answer I give would be a bit of a guess. It depends on which team they're in. I would say it would depend on the culture in that team and how their team's taking them on the journey. For instance, if it was my team and I ran a contact center, they've all moved to chat already, for instance, right? So, and most have and should have, and we know that chat will get smarter and smarter. Now, if it was my team, that would create more opportunities for the smart people in the team to add more high value to their role. So I'd be taking them on that journey as opposed to them seeing it as something that they're going to be replaced with. But that's just the leadership style I would take to that team. So I would think it would depend on which environment they're in. I don't honestly believe that AI will replace contact center agents completely. I think there's always that need for that human. I remember listening to someone once and said the most used number is, if when you call, press 1 for this, press 2 for this, everyone just skips those and goes, I want to speak to a person. Like by the time they're calling, they just want to speak to a person. And AI is getting a lot smarter, and that Apple does it really well. You don't realize you're talking to a bot. but there's always this point where people are needed, and especially in our world, they're calling for a reason. So yeah, it's just orientating your contact center to that and making sure your team is supported on that journey. But I think it can create amazing new roles that we don't even know of right now. Yeah.
100%. They were the questions in the chat. Did anyone else have any questions that they'd like to ask on the call? Andrew?
Yeah, I'll have a quick one, Wendy. One thing you said is you're a very fast decision maker. How do you get your stakeholders to go along with that? Because it's great that you can make those decisions. For example, my wife works in insurance. Nobody wants to ever make a decision because they don't want to be held accountable for them. So how do you get those decisions pushed through?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've worked for government for 6 months once and went, this isn't for me because of that culture. I don't have a magic answer, to be honest, Andrew. I think persistence, persistently working away at the problem and not giving up. And that 11-month example, if it's something you fundamentally believe in, you've got to advocate for the decision and strengthen your business case through facts, through figures, through research, and attach it to the right strategy. And sometimes decisions won't be made because it's not the right decision for the organization at that point in time. And that can be really hard to accept. And I've had to let go of some things in the past to go, it wasn't, I landed at the wrong place, wrong time, wrong decision. Even though in the background you go, that they're going to regret this, not making this, you kind of have to let go of it a bit, but be really persistent, really robust, and then advocate, find your advocates, find the right stakeholder group, because I think a crowd can make a decision happen more than an individual. Those are the techniques that have worked for me. And then there's also annual cycles, right, of planning and organization. So learning about that to go, when is the money released and when are the board meetings and how does my MD actually make decisions, and kind of learning about the organizational culture. There will be a way, but every organization will be quite different. But sometimes you just can't. You have to actually, which can be frustrating, especially if you're convinced it's the right decision. It's infuriating that you can't. But then sometimes it can also generate innovation because you have to find another way, which isn't always a bad thing.
I was going to jump in earlier and say it's probably a good idea you don't get a job in government, Wendy. Yeah, I see you know what I mean by that.
Yeah, I worked on a program for 6 months, which was really, really innovative for the Department of Labor, but I just couldn't. It's just too hard to get anything done, to be honest.
I'm conscious that we're just about out of time. I just wanted to sort of highlight something from Andrew's question about, bringing people on the journey towards that decision point and the relationships you're developing with those people over time. I'm sure you've seen that play out in your organisations. Yeah,
and I do want to touch on architecture for a second, because I know we're an architecture group, but one of the, I wish we had more business architects. I honestly think it's like a superpower that not enough organizations have, because it enables you to see on a page or 5 your organizational capabilities and what happens if that capability is missing. And I think that if that's a skill you have, use that to your advantage, because it can actually really simplify the decisions you're trying to make, because you can understand the impact on the organization capability. And so that would be something to help. That's a role, if you are in an architecture role, that can actually help the stakeholders feel more confident in the decision they're making, because often you're given a decision but you don't really understand the impact or scale of the decision you're being asked to make. And that's why it's hesitant, because how do you possibly know when you're 4 or 5 layers up that decision, how's it really going to change the org? And so I think some of the architecture capabilities can really help decision making if done well. But again, you need an advocate to really understand that and get it to the right stakeholders in the right way. It can really be a good tool, I think.
That's fantastic. Conscious of time, I think that was fantastic. Thank you, Wendy, for sharing all of that with us. I feel like we're just scratching the surface, though, so maybe we need to organise more conversations. But I'd just like to sort of hand back to Christine to wrap us up for today. And again, thank you, Wendy.
Thanks, Daryl.
Thanks, Daryl, and thank you, Wendie, so much for sharing again so generously with us. I think just the topic on how the heck you managed to get down to 4 days a week when I'm still struggling to stay semi-retired. I think we need a whole session just on that.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, and Wendie, I know you've got a hard stop at 3:30, and I've just got a couple of slides I want to share with the group. So if you've got to go, feel free to jump off any time. And again, thank you so much.
Thank
for
you. It's so nice to meet you. Don't hesitate to add me on LinkedIn or ping me a message if anyone's got any other questions. Really appreciate it and happy to be of any support to anybody. So thanks for listening, and I'll see you guys soon.
and talk soon. See you when
I can figure out how to leave Zoom. It's different teams.
exit.
Oh, there we go.
There's a
I see
little
the door.
button.
Okay,
Perfect. See
yeah.
you, Wendie. Okay, for everybody else who's still online, I just wanted to bring to your attention, we are planning a face-to-face catch-up, hopefully in all the capital cities right around Australia. Would love to do one in New Zealand as well. The date we picked is a Wednesday, the 11th of December. If you're like me, I really value and treasure the opportunity to make those human face-to-face connections. So stay tuned. If anybody can help us in the capital cities to organize this event as well, please reach out to either Daryl, Heidi, Martin, or myself. And we would love some help and support to make this happen. At this stage, I'm thinking about inviting somebody to come and speak at the event as well, so that we can get some more knowledge share happening in the room as well. And last but not least, if you want to get in touch with us, there are our email contact details, but also feel free to get in touch on LinkedIn. If you know anybody who wants to join our cause, and remembering that women in architecture is not just about women, it's about how do we support women in architecture roles to be successful. So what behaviors do we need to turn up to work at so that we can encourage more women to embark on these careers as architects, and hopefully see those percentages go up a little bit more next year, Daryl. Cool. And if there's nothing else, I'll call a close to our event. Feel free to send us feedback as well via email, what you enjoyed from the session and what you'd like to see perhaps in our next session. Thank you, everyone, for joining. See ya.
Bye.